I'm just trying to see the difference between the standalone and the cluster, because in standalone, the way I see it, I think it's more of a manual failover which needs to be done in an event when the primary one goes down. No. We can configure in standalone also, like automatic failover. In case if your production vault goes down, then after 7 minutes your DR vault will be up in case if you configure automatic failover. But in standalone only one vault at the production site. But in case if you install cluster in a production data center, we have 2 vaults. Like more vigilance. So, in case, if your active vault goes down, then we get a passive vault. So for more vigilance we can go with cluster. So most of the organizations, like 90%, I can say, will go with cluster. So does it mean that it's more of a VIP configuration being done? Yeah. So how many users for the standalone cluster and distribution, like as in a standalone 1 vault? Is there a limitation? How many users we can configure in a cluster? There is no limitation for users, because that user load will be handed over by pbws server, not by the vault. So how many accounts you are planning to onboard? Based on that vault can be designated to the end customer. Okay. So coming to distributed vault architecture. So, in case if your client or organization is having multiple data centers across the globe, then in that case we need to go for distributed vault. So in distributed vault architecture. So in case, if your organization is having data centers across Asia, India and Americas, then we can go with distributed vault architecture. So we can take one vault as a master vault and remain as a slaves. Okay. So in distributed vault architecture master vault will be active and at regular intervals data will be replicated to the slave vaults. In case of any failure scenario for the master vault, that primary slave will become as a master vault. I hope this 3 kind of architecture is clear and vault saves and privilege type of information is also clear. But again, if it is a distributed right, suppose if there is one vault server designated at Hong Kong, so we would have only one vault in place, or should that again have a redundancy of a DR within itself? No, there is no DR. Exactly so. The slaves will act as a DR. Okay, fair enough. That makes sense. Here in a distributed, the master is there. As you said, the vault saves and PA information is in Asia. So EMA and Americas, so have some different. It should be have the same save or PA information, or should be different information. Okay. So this vault saves and PA info is same around all the vaults, not in the distributed in case, if you consider your standalone or cluster also. So, in case, if you consider standalone, this data will be replicated from fraud to DR vault at regular intervals. So in case if it is a different, In case if the production vault goes down, then how you can restore that DR? Yes, this data should be similar. This data should be identical. So all the data from the fraud vault will be replicated to DR vault at regular intervals and in the cluster also same. So if the data from active vault will be replicated to the DR vault at regular intervals, either it may be 60 minutes or 30 minutes again, it depends upon the company to company. But why we need to go for distributed means in case if your organization is having a DR vault, then you can go for distributed means. Okay, so if you consider your standalone, you can go for distributed means. Okay. So if you consider your standalone, you can go for distributed means. Okay. So if you consider your standalone, you can go for distributed means. Okay. So if you consider your standalone, you can go for distributed means. Okay. So if you consider your standalone, you can go for distributed means. Okay, so if you consider your standalone, you can go for distributed means. Okay. So if you consider your standalone, you can go for distributed means. So if you consider your standalone, you can go for distributed means. Okay, so if you consider your standalone, you can go for distributed means. So if you consider your standalone, you can go for distributed means. Okay. So if you consider your standalone, you can go for distributed means. So if you consider your standalone, you can go for distributed means. Okay, so if you consider your standalone, you can go for distributed means. Okay. So if you consider your standalone, you can go for distributed means. Okay, so if you consider your standalone, you can go for distributed means. So here we can take to some legacy. Okay, let's take that. So that is only benefit, first of all to the what you need to born with a dish to the worlds, or, in case of your co-concepts, having data centers across the board and otherwise with a program cluster. In this case, does it mean that folks, kindergarten, who knows? I had having one master vault as such, and the pbws server is something which is local to Hong Kong and something like for EMEA. I will have a slave, but it is more of a DR kind of a thing, not so active the vault, but I will have a local pbws server, again right, which will again relate back for the authentication or anything to Hong Kong itself, because that's the master vault. Okay. Okay. Yeah. I'll just keep on next. So it is asking for license file path. Now browse and look at your license file. It is in the desktop. Right. Scroll down. Scroll down to bottom. Yeah, expand select installers. Just select the installer. Okay, it will read the file, is it? Okay. Click OK. It is asking for operator CD file. So you need to remember, during the initialization, it will ask for operator CD, not for master CD. So I will explain the use of master CD in later class. But you need to remember like. So what are the files required for initialization? One is license file and other one is operators. Now click on Browse and select the operator CD file. Someone first. We selected which key? Which one?